From the St. Francis Yacht Club in San Francisco, this is the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, hosted by Ron Young.
Welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, live from the virtual grill room of the St. Francis Yacht Club. We hope that you and your family are safe and sheltering in a comfortable environment while we get through this pandemic, and we look forward to greeting you back at the Yacht Club just as soon as conditions permit. Our guest today is world-renowned and known to many of us for decades. He is an author, a TV commentator, a great sailor, and more than anything else, an ambassador for sailing. Born at mid-century in Hackensack, New Jersey, our guest today began sailing in Toms River aboard his father's catboat and local penguins. He then graduated to Barnegat Bay, where he sailed Eastgals and lasers. And by age 16, he was named Barnegat Bay Outstanding Junior Sailor of the Year. He thought at the time, what you learn is more important than how you finish. Our thoughtful, athletic high schooler is seen here in his 1940 Packard, just before leaving for college. At State University of New York Maritime College, just a few miles east of his hometown, our guest joined the sailing team, and lucky for them that he did. As it turns out, he would become collegiate All-American 3 years straight and win the men's single-handed national championship twice. Well, of course, he'd become College Sailor of the Year twice and win the National Fluke Championship as well. When it was time to graduate from college, he just jumped across the bay and became the professional sailing coach for the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point. He did that so successfully that after several years, the U.S. Naval Academy recruited him down to Annapolis for the same exact job. During his travels, he met many great sailors, including Ted Turner and Robbie Doyle. In 1977, Ted Turner recruited our guest to become the tactician aboard Courageous. They were quite a duo, the colorful tycoon skipper and the articulate, brainy tactician. The more they sailed together, the more they learned from each other. And they would sweep the Aussies 4-zip and win America's Cup 23. Our speaker noted how Ted Turner's sailing success yielded business successes as well, and launched his own speaking tour. Our speaker began giving talks all around the country on stories about the America's Cup, racing at the Grand Prix level, and preparation for the 1980 Olympics. It was one of those talks in 1978 that I met our speaker at the Corinthian Yacht Club. He and Ted Turner had come to Tiburon to give a talk about how they won the America's Cup. In 1979, Turner recruited him again, this time as tactician of Turner's Admirals Cup team aboard the 61-footer Tenacious. Their great team would travel across the country and compete in a harrowing regatta, including the now infamous 1979 Fastnet race. The winds were over 60 knots and the waves over 45 feet tall. 24 yachts were abandoned, 5 yachts sunk, and regrettably, 15 sailors died. As Turner handed over the helm to the young Jobson halfway across the ocean, he yelled at him, "Take off your hat, Jobson. You've got to hear the weather." Of 303 starters, only 87 boats finished. Turner and Jobson won first place overall. With these successes in the America's Cup and the Fastnet, our speaker began a tremendous career of writing and ultimately as a television commentator. He's authored 21 books and 1,200 television programs for ESPN, NBC, PBS, and the Olympics. In 1978, with co-author Ted Turner, our guest wrote his first book, The Racing Edge. And over the years, his prolific pen would create 21 books, including his latest, Legends of American Sailing, which is available right now on Amazon. In 1980, he began producing videos. And in 82, teamed up with our own Tom Blackhaller to found the Defender Courageous Syndicate, of which yours truly was a lowly member. In 83, He served ably as a tactician for Tom Blackhawler in the Defender trials for us. And in '86, with television good looks, he became an ESPN on-air analyst and covered the America's Cup 26 down in Perth, where Tom and I brought the Golden Gate Challenge. He did well. The coverage earned him a award of cable excellence or an ACE award. His work in television production would earn him 2 Emmys, one in 1988 in sailing for the Olympic Games, and one in 2006 for the Volvo Ocean Race coverage they did, as well as 4 Kelly Awards. And to date, our speaker has given over 2,800 lectures on sailing, all practicing for today. For the 25 years from 1992 through 2017, he was the national chairman of the Leukemia Cup Regatta and raised $62 million for cancer research. He thought at the time, when you help someone else, the person helped most was yourself. In 2003, Jobson's words would prove prophetic, and the smiles replaced with worry, as he was diagnosed with lymphoma. While lying in a hospital bed for 10 days, he thought, okay, Mr. Superstar Tactician, how are you going to get me out of this? With all the medicine and good treatment that he got through lymphoma, and in 2009 was elected president of U.S. Sailing, and from 2012 through 2020, elected vice president of World Sailing. He's been named to every important Sailing Hall of Fame, including the America's Cup Sailing Hall of Fame and the National Sailing Hall of Fame. And he served on the board of directors or board of trustees for the Leukemia Cup Regatta, the Olympic Sailing Committee, U.S. Sailing, the New York Yacht Club, and so many more that we can't list them. He's become a full-time grandfather now. And so Gary Jobson, sailing's most valuable ambassador, welcome to Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.
Well, thank you very much, Ron. It's nice to be at the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, which I've done many times over the years, but it has been a couple of years since I've been with you. And boy, has our world changed, hasn't it, with COVID-19? And like you say, I hope everybody's safe. I must say, St. Francis is a wonderful yacht club, and the Big Boat Series and all the racing there. And you've got the ultimate venue. And that was shown worldwide during the America's Cup back in 2013. Because I was one of the sad ones when the Cup went to Bermuda, of all places, not in the US of A in 2017. But Tom Blackhawler's dream of racing multi-hulls on San Francisco Bay in the America's Cup, which he talked about in 1988 when he was doing some commentary with us on ESPN during the Dennis Connor's Big Boat versus a Catamaran, that was in Tom's head. And, I'm sure Tom is up in the heavens looking down, kind of smiling that he was, as normal, ahead of the curve, and there it was happening. Well, here we are with the America's Cup again, the 20th America's Cup in my lifetime, and I have followed every single one of them closely from an 8-year-old in 1958. And I was there in Newport in 1962 at Fort Adams. I was 12 years old. And I'll never forget seeing the sight of Weatherly and Gretel being towed out to the starting line, all the crew in uniform. And I grew up in Barnegat Bay, New Jersey. You know, we had sneak boxes and scows and penguins and all kinds of nondescript craft. And here these 12 meters had masts reaching up into the sky and hundreds of spectator boats. And I've been a fan ever since. I got to sail on 5 different teams over the years, and I covered 9 more for ESPN and NBC. And now I'm a spectator, and I'm kind of enjoying it because it would have been hard to get to New Zealand this year. I'm sad that I'm missing it, but I've been watching all the races and talking to lots of people. And like everybody, I've got my own opinions, and I'm going to share some of those and make some observations and maybe a little forecast of what's going to happen. Before I get to the America's Cup in Auckland, I wanted to show just a brief promo film of a longer film that I've produced. It's going to be released this weekend at the 12-meter Yacht Club. And I brought a little 3-minute promo about it. But let me just put this in perspective. The international 12-meter class was formed at a conference in London in 1907. It was a 5-day conference, some smart people, and they came up with a meter rule. There were 6 meters and 5.5 meters and 8 meters, 10 meters, 12 meters. There was even a 23 meter, which kind of evolved into the great J boats in the 1930s. But the 12 meter hit a nerve chord in a good way. They were raced in the Olympic Games 3 times, 1908, 1920, and 1912. And when they were looking for a new boat for the America's Cup in 1958, the J boats were simply too big, too expensive. They went to 12 meters, and we got 10 America's Cups out of those 12 meters. There were 180 of these boats built. 120 were built out of wood. 3 were built out of fiberglass, and the other 57 were built out of aluminum. So the most recent 12-meter built was in 1986. I think Dennis Connor's Stars and Stripes or one of the Kookaburras, they were built in 86. But amazingly, these boats are still out being raced. I mean, Courageous, a boat that I sailed in 2 America's Cups on, was built, I was there on launch day in May of 1974. And here we are in 2021, 47 years later. This boat is still competitive and out there. And a year ago, 2019, we had a world championship in Newport, Rhode Island, and 23 12 meters were there for this racing. Now, we had modern boats like Courageous and Intrepid and Challenge 12, Freedom, all great boats. But we also had some wing keel boats, and we had some of the old classics dating back to the late 1920s. You have to keep in mind, 12 meters were the technological marvels of their day. They're beautiful. So keep that in mind, and then we're going to advance to foiling monohulls.
They're just flat beautiful.
There's nothing as handsome as half a dozen 12s out on the wind.
It's pretty unbelievable to see this many boats in one place is remarkable.
It's like sailing a beautiful work of art.
It's a different kind of sailing than what most of us do today.
There are more good sailors here probably sailing the 12s than ever, which means I know I'm getting more out of Courageous than I would have been able to back then. We just know more. The sails are more refined. We're managing the rigs better, trim tabs better, basically just a little bit better all around. The boats, BMG, are definitely getting around the course quicker.
Boy, oh boy, the technology is so much better. The sails are better. The equipment's phenomenal, and I think they're significantly faster. I mean, they're phenomenal boats to sail right now.
This is probably the most interdependent sport that I've ever done. So it's great teamwork. The boat's really, really fun to sail.
But overall, it's still a very heavy boat and so very demanding in terms of forestay sag and how much to trim and stuff. So it requires a lot of finesse.
It's an inch on the main sheet, an inch on the Genoa, a little bit on the trim tab. It's just the right balance of all 3 things together.
The boats that you see today would beat the original boats, each one of them, by a considerable margin.
Oh, I think they're just a blast to sail. They're really loaded boats, and they're big penalties for getting too slow, and you get to sail with 16 of your good friends, so it's a great time.
It's pretty interesting to be in a fleet which is boats are very equal, and there's a lot of good sailors, so I think people enjoy that.
These boats are all similar in speed, and it comes down to crew. And crew, how you perform as a team. That's why I love racing these things.
They're fun boats. They're heavy boats. They're not like these things that go 30 miles an hour and you got to hang on for dear life. And that's why everybody seems to love them.
They sail beautifully. It's just they're damn good boats. These are now, in some cases, 40, 50-year-old boats. If you go all the way down to the traditionals, even older.
Getting an opportunity to actually get a sailing team together and go and try out against a bunch of legends in the same waters, impossible to say no.
It's a little bit like a 1956 Ferrari. I mean, these things are just so beautiful.
There's nothing like it. The sounds they make, the smell, the feel, it's all visceral. It's a wonderful experience.
It's not a speed thing, it's a power thing. And when you get these boats loaded up, it's a great feeling.
There's nothing cooler than seeing these boats cruise around Narragansett Bay.
Probably the most fun of any boat that I've ever sailed.
We've got some very good people, and that's what it takes. We need people that love these boats and want to leave them better than they found them.
Nice commercial for the 12-pounders.
All right, well, I just a little trip down memory lane. Of course, US 49 and USA sailed there on the bay, going up and down endlessly with Tom Blackwell and Paul Kayard and Kenny Keefe and so many other great sailors from San Francisco Bay. But I just thought you'd put that in perspective when you start looking at these foiling monohulls that we're going to look at here in the next few minutes. So like I said,
you have a commercial for the class right over your shoulder. You got a picture of Courageous in their original color scheme right on your left shoulder right now. There you are, exactly right.
Right. That is a model. It's exactly the same model that is in the New York Yacht Club. And they have 1,800 models of boats in the New York Yacht Club on the wall and the trophy cases. And when I speak there, people, what's the most interesting model? I said, well, the one with the green deck, Courageous, of course, but it could be more interesting than that. So, like I said, the America's Cup never ceases to amaze me. Someone once wrote that the America's Cup is a synonym for things brave and big and famous. And I would say, I would add one more word, spectacular. No inanimate object is more beautiful than an America's Cup yacht, racing bow to bow, sailing for glory and into our affections. And I think that's how we can describe it, no matter what boats are racing for the Cup. And the stakes are so high because if you win the Cup, you take the trophy and the regatta to your hometown. And it's hard to imagine how many millions and millions of dollars have been spent over the years trying to get it. And what makes the Cup so intriguing is it's played by people who are used to winning at everything they do, but now they're in an arena that they can't guarantee success. And so for that reason, it makes it great fun to watch. Of course, when you're participating in it, on the one hand, you feel a lot of pressure and you know about the long tradition and history and legacy. But on the other hand, you're so practiced up. You and the rest of the crew and maybe coaches have got everything down to every tuning, every eventuality, every move. You're ready. So even if you win or lose, you can go out there with a clear conscience, knowing that you really came, you did the best you can. And Ron, I just want to make one more comment before I go on to the current America's Cup. USA in 1986-87 was a really good boat. And Tom and Alberto Calderon and Heiner Meldner and others that were involved in the design, they really were on the leading edge, even far more advanced than the wing keel of Australia 2 in 1983.
You ever heard that Defender dog go 8-3 upwind? You ever hear it 8-3? Not once.
And I've long thought if Tom and the crew had about 3 or 4 weeks more.
Tom and I discussed it many times, and we actually came down to, we thought about 5 more weeks. We actually could have, because we were growing, learning how to sail the boat faster, the steering mechanism being the biggest, trickiest part of it all. Remember, we had these long, aluminum poles and stuff like that, and that just took a little longer. But thanks, you're right. We actually started that whole process in his room in his apartment up at the Watergate, and we looked at all these designs because we had to catch up with NYYC, who'd already had their 3rd boat race in the World Championship.
Well, you passed them,
and ultimately when we beat them in the end, it was like the most glorious opportunity for us because nobody would have given us 10-to-1 odds, 100-to-1 odds that we'd be able to beat faster than them to begin with. So thanks for that, Gary. It's much appreciated.
Thank you. Well, let's switch gears to the 2021 America's Cup. And oh my goodness, I wouldn't have predicted 10 days ago that Luna Rossa would have defeated the British 7-1. The British looked so good there in that early round robin. And as they advanced, and the Italians and New York Yacht Club raced against each other, which tells me that we can't possibly predict with any accuracy what is going to happen between Luna Rossa and Emirates Team New Zealand. And again, because of that, it's going to make it great fun. I have a feeling that spread over those days, wind conditions will probably make a difference. In other words, one boat might be better in lighter wind and another in heavier wind, but we don't know. And that makes it fun. But there are some clues. So keep in mind, this America's Cup, Ron, there's been so little racing in advance of the Christmas regatta and the World Series regatta back in December and the trials. You know, in past years, we've had lots of racing and people knew where they were and knew what changes, but they've been sailing in the dark a little bit. And that too has made it a little bit tough. Now, in that regatta in December, New Zealand won 5 races and lost 1. The only race they lost was to the New York Yacht Club. But in that race, they came roaring up from behind, upwind. And, you know, I asked Terry Hutchinson, were they going that fast or were you out of wind or something? He said, no, they were going that fast. So it was curious to me why New Zealand in all those races seemed to have below average starts and yet ended up winning 5 out of 1 races. Is that a harbinger? I don't know, but it's a little bit of an observation.
Big question about whether they had a lot more in reserve than we knew about.
Well, based on what we saw in Bermuda in 2017, I'm willing to bet they've got more in reserve. And the question here, so the Italians surely have benefited from the round robins and then having a go against American Magic, winning 4-0, and then having another series against Ineos Team UK going 7-1. Right. So that is 16 races they've had that New Zealand has no races. Now, the Kiwis certainly are going to look at all the video and analyze the times, and they'll know how fast Luna Rossa is around the race course in different wind conditions. And Luna Rossa won't know how fast New Zealand is because those races in December don't count. And like I said, I wonder if they sandbag. And my one clue to that question, did they sandbag, goes back to Bermuda in 2017. You might recall that New Zealand lost both races to Oracle Team USA, Spittle, in a preview regatta they had in Bermuda before the trials got going. Right. And of course, the defender, Oracle, didn't have to race until the Cup against New Zealand, and then New Zealand got out there and clobbered them 7-1. So did they hold back a little bit? I think they did, and we'll see if that follows suit. We'll know a lot more after the races get going. Fascinating that there's now been 7 different kinds of boats racing for the America's Cup since we said goodbye to the 12 meters way back in 1987. And this version, foiling monohulls, you know, when I first heard that, foiling monohulls in the America's Cup, that was, you know, hard for me to even fathom or believe. But to everybody's credit, they're making them work. The boats are fast, they're incredibly maneuverable, but they're also kind of fragile. Everybody has had a capsize. Everybody's had serious problems with their foils going up and down. And in some cases, like American Magic and the British in the early going, have had some trouble. The rigs are interesting with these kind of double mainsails wrapped around the mast, and we can see from one camera angle that the Traveler is constantly going up and down all the time, but yet the sail trim isn't much. I mean, the difference between upwind and downwind, the apparent wind is so far forward that you really don't ease these sails out very much. Of course, the headsails are different sizes and a little bit different shapes. And think about this. These boats are sailing almost 4 times the speed of true wind. In San Francisco in 2013, they were going almost 3 times the speed of the wind. Now they're going about 4 times the speed of the wind. You know, and you know, it's not going 40 knots, you're almost bored. You know, so it really tells you that these things are marvels. But it's so important to stay up in the foil. If you come down off that foil, one little mistake, particularly around the starting line, you're cooked. I don't think you really recover. The boats.
And yet, if you aren't really careful and keep the boat level in the tack or the jibe, you flip the boat. So you got this real knife's edge. Really,
you do. And the scariest thing is rounding that windward mark and bearing off, which I'm going to address a little bit with American Magic here in a minute. You know, one of the things I like about both New Zealand and Italy is that they're mostly nationals of the country they represent. I think the Kiwis only have 1 Australian, Glenn Ashby, and interestingly, Italy, they have 1 Australian, and James Spithill. So, but they're all national crews, which really, to me, is the essence of the America's Cup. And lucky you, everybody out in California, you're going to get to watch these races at 7 p.m. Pacific time, live, prime time sailing. Very cool. So I wanted to make some comments about American Magic. And I think it's fair to say, like all Americans, I was really hoping that they would win. And I had visions of the Cup returning to Newport, Rhode Island. I've been thinking about, I sure hope it gets there someday in my lifetime. And it's been gone since 1983. So that's almost 38 years ago. When you think about it, racing in the America's Cup is a tough game. When you win, you're on top of the world. And when you lose, it's really tough to get over. And I can tell you from experience, I've been both sides of the equation. Winning and losing, winning is a lot more fun. And most people that race in the America's Cup, when it's all said and done and their careers in the Cup are over, most people lose more than they win. It's that hard of a regatta to win. You know, Dennis Conner lost more, Ted Turner, Ted Hood. I think Russell Coutts might be an exception. But it's a tough regatta, and it's expensive. It's logistically difficult. It requires the latest in technology. It requires, frankly, superhuman effort. And usually it's an emotional roller coaster ride from day to day, race to race, on and off the water. Straight gin. No, I'm just kidding. But all with all losing America's Cup campaigns, there's lots of compassion when you aren't going to be able to sail anymore and others are going out. And but there's also little introspective analysis, which I think is really important. You know, it's easy to say why you win, but it's hard to say why you lose. But you learn from your mistakes. And Ted Turner always used to say when he lost a baseball game or a sailboat race, "Well, I'm not losing. I'm just learning how to win," which I think is a good statement. Look, American Magic sailed poorly. I'm sorry to say it that way, but they did. They had poor starts, starting 4 boat lengths behind, a length to leeward, coming off the line behind, and then you're forced to the wrong side of the course. And you know, when the races counted, they lost 8 races in a row and never did get a victory. So there's a lot to look at and try and figure out what happened. But one race, they were looking pretty good against Italy. The breeze was up, it was strong, 12 to 16 most of the time around the race course. And on the 5th leg, approaching the last windward mark, they had about a 500-meter lead, which equates to about 40 seconds, which is a lot in these boats. And all they had to do was round the mark, head downwind. It was about 1.7 miles to the finish. So they would have gotten down there in about 3.5 minutes, and they would have scored a much needed win at that point. But it all turned ugly. So as they're approaching the windward mark on port, you could hear discussion going on in the cockpit. And at one point, and I got the quote here, Paul Goodison says, "I think it's a smarter move to do a bear away and then jibe. I think it's going to be a very difficult and hard maneuver to tack and bear away." And we saw a shot of Dean Barker, the helmsman. He was looking pretty uncomfortable just before the boat kind of lurched out of control. And curiously, Terry Hutchinson, who's the skipper of the boat and the tactician, is grinding away on one of the winches. 52-year-old grinder, I question that. But if you're the tactician, you got to be looking around all the time. And he was spending his time grinding. And then, almost like a knee-jerk reaction, Dean Barker tacked right at the mark. And they talked about, they could see the puff coming. It got up to about, I think, 23 knots. And they tacked over, and the boat launched and went up in the air. The foil actually came out of the water at one point, and the boat came down incredibly hard, and they got a hole in the bottom. And eventually, when they got it upright, it filled up with water, obviously, with the hole. They were darn lucky it didn't sink. They waterlogged all their electronics and computers and instruments. The hydraulics were broken and didn't work. The hull had some structural damage, and it was going to be hard. I must say, I have to give a lot of credit to the other teams that rushed to their advantage. And I don't think there were any injuries, and the boat didn't sink. And so, good on the other teams that came over and lent assistance, and they didn't sink. So I thought was really good. But the fact that Goodison, who's maybe the best sailor on the boat, I mean, he's an Olympic gold medalist, laser world champion, won foiling Moss, the world championship 3 times. He was trimming the wing.
Very relevant class. It's an apparent wind machine, completely.
I kind of wonder why he, wasn't steering, but anyway, that's not my call. And then you have to give a lot of credit to that shore crew that got that boat put together. I'm sure it was a Herculean task to patch it all up. And I know they borrowed parts from Defiant, the tune-up boat, the first boat they had, and they got it back out in the water. But once they got out for the next round, the semifinal, it was not good. They really off the pace, way behind at the starting line. They were slow. I do have an editorial comment here. It was kind of strange to me that the semifinal was a best of 7 series, and yet the Prada Cup final and the America's Cup final is a best of 13. So it seems to me that the semifinal should have exactly replicated what the America's Cup is. And if that had happened, maybe with a scheduled 2 lay-days and 3 more races, maybe American Magic could have gotten things turned around. Like we saw with Oracle back in 2013. Let's not forget, they were down quite a bit, and they got a lay-day and figured out how to foil upwind, and that made a big difference. And then
every time you change the design in the AC, it puts a bigger prize on learning how to sail the new beast. And these are real beasts. No question that American Magic's greatest loss in the capsize, it seemed to me, Gary, was a loss of time tuning the boat and getting familiar with racing the boat and sailing the boat, especially with all the moving parts in these machines, rudders and all that.
And they had very little racing. I mean, one last editorial comment here.
Supporting your comment that a longer racing semis or a longer elimination series would have given all the boats more time.
Yes.
And better, it would have been better safety factor too.
I mean, we're only talking about 4 boats, and there's only 3 in the challengers. And okay, you have a round robin, you get to seeding, somebody gets to sit out, got that. But why not the semifinals replicate exactly with the Prada Cup final, which replicates exactly with the America's Cup? I mean, that's why I'm such an advocate of having an Olympic trials as opposed to, okay, the top boat in a world championship goes to the Olympics. I'd rather see an American fleet of boats racing in the winter, exactly same format as the Olympic Games. We would be better off. But that's another topic. And Ron, I am going to cover the Olympics for NBC next summer. for Tokyo 2021 now, not 2020. And maybe I'll get back. You'll invite me for lunch.
We'd love to have you come back and give us a presentation.
Right after the Cup
yeah,
next summer. So what I wanted to say is something that I think the New York group really has to look at. So Terry Hutchinson is a very talented sailor. I've known him as a young man here in Annapolis, Maryland. I mean, no question, the man is good. He's won lots of world championships, Rolex Yachtsman of the Year a couple times. But he was the CEO of the campaign. He was the chief spokesman. He was the skipper of the boat. He was a tactician of the boat. He's a grinder. I mean, no matter how talented somebody is,
right?
How many jobs can one person do?
Right.
I mean, Blackhole knew to have you and others helping out, so he could concentrate on the sailing. And same with Paul Kayard on America One back in 2000. You know, Connor and Russell Coots had managers. Connor had Malin Burnham.
Jerry Ladow.
Had Larry Ellison. Yeah, Jerry Ladow. And
EC had Ladow, etc. Right.
But American Magic didn't have it. All right. So I put together a little video that I'd like to show. And I'm going to narrate this live. So I don't have a script here. So here we are in Auckland, New Zealand, known as the City of Sails, a beautiful place. And of course, everybody and his brother and sister are in the sport of sailing. And the race courses are close to land, so hopefully people can see it. The courses are 1.7 or 1.8 miles legs, and most of the time they will have 6 legs. I like the windward and leeward gates. That keeps boats out of phase and helps the boat behind a little bit. They do have boundaries, which keeps it in check. And the whole race takes about 25 minutes, although there is a 45-minute timeline. Peter Burling leads the New Zealand team, Olympic gold medalist, world champion, and America's Cup winner. He'll be tough. Jimmy Spithill leads Luna Rosa. The great helmsman is proving to be super strong in the starts. And they are the challenger, and we'll see them in the final. They defeated Team Eneos GBR, 4-time Olympic gold medalist Spain Ainsley was at the helm. I'm sure he's disappointed. And then American Magic, led by Terry Hutchinson and Dean Barker, looked promising in the regatta in December, but as I described, had a lot of trouble in the races for real, and they were 0-8 in the trials. So here's a little look in the December regatta, and this is American Magic against New Zealand. And many of us were hoping this would be the America's Cup final, and it'll be good racing. And notice in this race that the New Zealanders are behind at the start. Are they having trouble with their foils, or are they doing it on purpose? We don't know. We'll find out. And it was the only loss by New Zealand, and it was a nice win for American Magic. Luna Rosa was 3-3 in that series, and split with American Magic. They lost one time, and American Magic won one time. Terry Hutchinson grinding there, Dean Barker at the helm. And, you know, they have microphones to communicate with each other, keeping the weight down low in these grinding pits. Frankly, it looks like a long day. Luna Rosa has an interesting system with two helmsmen. Now, here we are when this puff of wind at American Magic in the round robin series. Look at Dean Barker there, and the boat literally goes up. Wow, look at that. The foil completely out of the water. The boat comes down hard. Obviously, the shore team takes over, and American Magic comes to a stop, and then they capsize. Nobody's injured. Everybody's staying on the boat. Shore crew can't believe it. Go for the rescue. Now, everybody's capsized before. Let's take a little slower look at it here. They come around, and the question is whether they should attack or not. They're going over 50 knots. They leap up out of the water, and then the boat comes down hard right there. And that's what punched a hole in the hull, a hole in the hull. And if you look underneath, you can see some things dangling. I'll push in a little bit there. That's where the hole in the boat was. It was very thin carbon fiber, and you can see the remnants there. And then, of course, going from 50 knots to 0. Here's Barker. Here's Barker. And, you know, they got help from some of the other shore crews. And I love the Band-Aids. A nice tribute to everybody, saying thank you to the British, the Italians.
Nice touch.
Yeah, very nice touch. So anyway, we moved on from the semifinal to the final. And this weekend, UK lost to the Italians. But here's a little look at the semifinal here. And American Magic on the start, on the right. Here's what I say. They didn't sail well. To start out like that, 4 boat lengths behind and a length to leeward is very tough. And it just got worse from there. They're on port tack going upwind, heel to windward a little bit, up on that foil. And Italy just starts slowly stretching out. And with these boundaries, very hard to catch up. And look at that. That's a very telling shot. The Italians pointing higher. Look at that twitchy helm with Dean Barker. So something wasn't quite right there. And American Magic comes off their foil. They had trouble in the final race.
Speed difference there, 44 knots versus 17 knots.
Right, well, they're off the foil.
Exactly,
and,
right.
Then they get penalized for going out of bounds. So they were having trouble getting their foils up and down, and here they are trying to get going. But meanwhile, we'll look ahead here, and you'll see that the Italians are about a mile ahead. You go a long way in a short period of time at this speed. I'm sure it's exhilarating, but not exhilarating when the other boat is so far ahead. And they come off the foil again. So, you know, that's over a mile, 1,900 meters. Hard to make up, and, you know, conservative rounding, and Luna Rosa easily wins. Now here's another start. Once again, USA well behind. Luna Rosa to windward, pointing higher. So that could be the big speed edge against New Zealand, is their ability to sail close to the wind.
Also, do you notice how flat? Essentially, the Italian sails seem to have a lot of form, a lot of shape to them. They seem to have way more draft in them. I kept wondering about that.
They have a lot of speed.
Yeah.
Anyway, when American Magic started having foil problems, that was it. So a little dejection on the American boat. You can understand why. Big disappointment. They thought they'd go a lot further in the series. Lots of hugs all around. And, you know, 3 cheers there. Nice. Exchange between the crews. So a little bit further here. So here we are now in the Prada Cup final. And once again, look at that. Italy, big lead coming off the starting line. So this is going to be something for the New Zealanders to figure out. How do they catch up? The British were able to keep it close, but very hard to pass. The British did win 1 race, but lost 7. That's quite a maneuver, by the way, foiling around the leeward mark and a length and a half later rolling into attack.
Right.
Now, at this point in this race, the difference in lead gets really small. You can see the lead is down to about 30 meters or so. And I'm thinking, well, this would be the time to go. You know, 20 meters, we're talking 1 boat length. Why didn't the Italians, or why didn't the British go right at them? But they didn't. And once again, Luna Rosa stretched out. And that was really it, 7-1. I have to say, as an editorial comment, that my 3rd one, I feel good that I was able to pull off screen share and do all this. You live in the Mecca internet and computers. And, here in Annapolis, I'm not quite as sophisticated, but anyway, there you go.
So, Gary, thanks very much. Fascinating to listen to somebody with as long a perspective as you have on the AC, having won it with Ted Turner back in '77, and then watch it incredibly carefully ever since. You were a great resource for us back in the Golden Gate Challenge days, because first of all, you knew how to sail well. And then nextly, when you came to us and said, we want to put cameras on the boat in Fremantle, remember that?
I do.
DC won't let us put cameras on his boat. For those who don't know, Dennis Conner wouldn't let him put cameras on the boat. So Tom and I talked about it and said, yeah, put the cameras on our boat for sure. And, you were a pioneer then. And ever since then, cameras on the boats have helped bring the action to the audience. And that's a big deal in sailing, because the truth is, sailing is just as exciting and physical and mental, of course, as any other sport. I would argue that it's the most complex sport. But in the same way that close-ups bring the action of football, the tackles and the guards and the quarterback and the wide receivers and the running backs are all brought to life because of the close-ups that you get with video. And essentially, by us putting cameras on the boats, we begin to cause that same excitement to be transmitted out to the fans. So you were a pioneer in that regard, and well deserving of the Emmy that you've won. And back in those days in Australia, when it was blowing 30 out on Fremantle, for God's sakes, there were lots of times we didn't want to think about, this salt water all over the doggone cameras, and it would have been less to worry about. But we were glad we said yes, and we were glad that you asked. So thanks again for that.
You could hear and see what was going on as opposed to boats in the distance. And now, look at the technology in these cups with cameras all over the place. But the question with the television coverage, don't do too much of it. People like to look at these things. And my favorite shot that I'm seeing in Auckland is the down water shot, because I want to understand how choppy the water is and what the wind strength is. And from the aerial, it almost looks like a video game where down in the water, it becomes real. These guys are sailing through all kinds of chop and umpire boats and spectator boats speeding around. Those waves go across the course, and they are having an effect.
So back in '78, when you and I were talking about the similarities between IODs and 12 meters, you said this to me once. You said, Ron, there's 120 things you can do when you tack a 12 meter. 120 things, and you said, don't forget, as you tack the 12 meter, the boat slows down, so you got to ease the jib halyard, you got to take the jib lead forward a little bit. There's all these things you can do. Now, I'm not saying every tack we're going to do 120 things, but there's so many things we can do. We get to prioritize what's the most important and speed affecting things. Well, when you take a look at the current cup boats, holy moly, somebody's got to be working the pitch. That is to say, the angle of the rudder, which basically keeps the bow of the boat up or down in the water. That's super important, as anybody who's flipped can tell you. Boats are more often going bow down than any other way when they're beginning their flip. Somebody's got to be paying attention to the old leeward board and the new, what's going to be the new engaged board, because they're going to be coming up at just the right time. Somebody's got to be paying attention to, of course, the traveler, and they're going to be paying attention to so many details. I was worried in Bermuda that, in fact, we didn't have enough flight control in the American team. The Kiwis were right off with having a dedicated person handling the flight control. The same thing is true with American Magic this time, where the helmsman handled the pitch sometimes. The Kiwis, I don't think, are doing that. And the Italians have a dedicated pitch person, and he changes side to side. Talk to us about the benefit of having an incredibly complex game like this sport. Many of us think it adds allure. Tell me your perspective on how complex these boats are to sail and how good that is for the game.
Well, up until now, I've sailed on every America's Cup boat, but I haven't been on these boats, but they are complicated. And we, the viewer, don't really get to see the intricacies of all that little adjustment that goes on. Things that make a difference between staying on the foil and coming off the foil. So the coordination between the wing trimmer, the flight controller, I love that title, flight controller for sailing.
Right.
And the helmsman has got to be right in sync, and then you got to stay powered up, hence 7 or 8 people grinding constantly to keep the pressure on with the hydraulics. So it is very complicated. But I have a gut feeling if they stay with these boats, they'll smooth some of that out, because we're probably in the infancy of foiling monohulls. I mean, you see it on these round the world races, they have foils and lift up a little bit, but this is something new to do, match racing. Probably the most impressive thing to me is their ability to maneuver and stay up on those foils. You'll remember in San Francisco in 2013, it was hard to stay on a foil going through a maneuver. And Oracle figured out just sail 7 degrees low, pop the thing up, and hence your VMG upwind was really improved. And that was really their big edge. Nobody figured out how to do that. Now they're foiling all the time. And if you come off, you're probably going to lose the race if you come up off that foil one time. So it's different skill sets. You know, laser sailors aren't used to flight controllers. And helmsmen, this is new. So the learning curve has really been steep. But New Zealand did so well in Bermuda. And Burling's won a Moth World Championship, a foiling boat, plus his 49er experience.
Right.
Jimmy Spithill, John Kostecki described him as fearless, which is really good. And Spithill's, you know, is really strong at the start. So if New Zealand goes for an even start, it's going to be a great race. If Spithill can pull his magic, it's going to make it a short regatta.
Yeah, but you and I know the Kiwis back in '87. Remember Kiwi Magic? The first plastic 12 meters. They were fast and fast all the way through the trials, and you know, in the very end, only in the end could DC beat them. Could somebody beat them? They'd only lost one race in all the trials. We raced against, they were fast.
Dennis Conner and John Marshall, Whidden and company, and you know, the American design team really were clever to say, you know, the winds are going to be strong, and in 12 meters, long water line is everything. So they made a big boat. They had to suffer in lighter air in those early trials, and when the breeze came on, they were faster, and the crew was good too. I mean, Dennis got good starts, and the crew was flawless. I'll never forget that one race where the jib blew out against New Zealand, and there's the crew up there changing a headsail, and Dennis tacks over the port with the new headsail going up, and here comes New Zealand on starboard. They're on the lay line, and New Zealand tacks to leeward. And you know, I think Dennis Conner got in Chris Dixon's head too.
Yeah.
I mean, Dixon, was he 23 or 24 at the time?
Right.
Dennis Conner was 45 years old and very seasoned in the America's Cup, and he was, you know, the world was smiling on him to return that. He was not going to be denied, and he wasn't.
You remember the press conference in Fremantle when Dennis looks over and says, "I don't know why you'd build a plastic boat unless you wanted to cheat."
Well, that was classic there with
and then Tommy
Tom
said,
Blackholer egging him on. Well, I
Right.
don't know why you'd build a boat out of unless you wanted to cheat. And Tom Blackholer, oops, I wouldn't have said that. You didn't.
I don't think you should have said that, Dennis.
Oh my God, the blaring headlines in New Zealand press, and Michael Fay was brilliant. Oh, you're not going to put holes in her to expect them to put a hole in her. I mean, I'm sure that the New Zealand boats were legal. I mean, over the years, they've been measured many, many times, but it was something new and different. And I think Dennis was trying to tweak Dixon, and he did.
So now a big question. So you well know that in 1851, the Yacht America was radically different from all of the British boats she sailed against in the first race around the Isle of Wight. And she won by eight minutes. And, you know, as the Queen may have said, Gary Mull used to tell me she didn't actually ask the question, and who is second. But the point is the boat was so much different than the other boats that she was lightning faster, okay? Now, people are complaining, and they complained that these boats are so complicated that, you know, it's not really sailing as much as it is technology. I would argue just the opposite. I would say the America's Cup has always been about technology and radical advances, and you have to learn how to sail your new tool, your new boat as rapidly as you can learn. Talk to us a little bit about the argument that we should keep the same designs for 2 or 3 cup cycles versus changing the cup cycle at the pleasure of the defender.
Well, the pendulum swings back and forth between Is it the sailor? Is it the technology? If you want one design sailing, go to the Olympic Games. All the classes are exactly one design. Maybe the 49ers got a tiny bit of development, but that's one design sailing.
Right.
The America's Cup is a friendly competition between foreign countries. And the whole idea is to find a way to come up with something new. They wanted breakthrough designs. They wanted something that was precedent setting. And the Cup has always been that way, and it should not change. That's why it makes it so intriguing. From my view, maybe the technology's gone a little bit too far, and we could bring it back to the sailor. I mean, all the computers are a lot on these boats, but yet, even in these races with all the technology, we're seeing you got to get a good start. You got to pick the first shift. You got to stay on the foils. You got to be able to round the marks. The boat handling makes a difference. So sailing is making a big difference in this Cup. And in the future, do we stay in these boats or not? I don't know. But I will tell you this, Ron. Nathaniel Harrishoff, John Cox Stevens, even Olin Stevens, they would embrace this. Everybody in the Cup was into boat speed. And these are the fastest boats of our age. And none of us can predict what is next. Nobody 40 years ago was talking about foiling monohulls on an America's Cup course, and we can't even envision what will happen. But the Cup will be around, and the boats will be faster, and it'll be intriguing. And the characters that sail these things are larger than life, which makes it so much fun.
So this is 2021. 100 years from now, in 2121, what America's Cup races are people going to look back and think is exciting?
Well, I think that races, those last couple of races in 2013 in San Francisco were epic. An 8-1 advantage and one more little race and canceled because of no win and coming back, and could they really pull it off? And you start thinking, and New Zealand's looking over shoulder. I think that whole series is going to never be forgotten. Well, 1983, Dennis was up 3-1 with with Liberty 3-1, and the Australians came back and won 3 straight races, and the trauma and the late A's and the intrigue and changing measurements, that will go down in history.
Dennis Conner jibing to port in light air. Halsey Harrishoff telling him the right side of the course.
Yeah, well, all those jives downwind and trying to play the wind shifts, big mistake.
Right.
I mean, look, the America's Cup is just filled with so many interesting people and stories. From Tom Blackwell to Dennis Conner to Ted Turner. I mean, we're not hearing from too many sailors, and they seem a little programmed to me at the press conferences. But then again, this Cup, there aren't many journalists down there. Everybody's working for a syndicator. The commentators in television work for the event. They're not independent working for a network. So, are they getting their bullet points and sticking to the script or not? ESPN always made sure that we were independent voices.
So you and I have each sailed 12 meters, and it's a unbelievably glorious boat. And we saw a great video earlier in your presentation. How do we hold and should we care about holding the attention level of youngsters who are weaned on video games and who are loving these foiling monohulls? Should we imagine a time back where we'd have J boats again? What was great about the Bermuda series was that there was a classic division and there was giant super yacht division. So people got a little bit of whatever they might like in that Cup series. But talk to me a little bit about how you get the broadest audience, and also including how do you hold on the young guys?
Well, one of the problems with the current America's Cup is that most sailors can't relate to a foiling boat. Yes, there's Moss out there and some of the around the world speedsters, but most people don't sail that way. Where the 12 meters, people could relate to, hey, I got a wrap in my spinnaker last weekend too. So the sport has got to relate to what people do. I mean, look, Steph Curry or LeBron James, the basket's 10 feet high. It's 90 feet from one end of the court to the other. The tennis in the Australian Open this past weekend, you got to get the ball over the net. It's that simple. The game is played the same for the high-end professional as the amateur. And here, the game is being played in a unique and interesting way, but not where everybody is out foiling. And I don't see foiling boats becoming the norm. They're fast, but they're dangerous and they're expensive, and skilled professionals can do it, but not everybody can do it. Look, we're running out of time, but like I said, I am a spectator in the America's Cup, watching from afar like a lot of other people, but I've been involved with it a long time. And I know what television audiences like. Lead changes on the race course, close races where the final position is in doubt to the end of the race or the end of the game. National crews on the boat are essential. You build up the legacy and the skill level of your own sailors, very important. The boats need to be beautiful, majestic, and big so you can see them. And they need to be fast and intriguing. So having said that, I would make sure that every crew on every boat was a national of their own country. I'd like to see a boat that's big, 90 or 100 feet, that goes 16 or 18 knots upwind and 25 or 30 knots downwind. I think that would be very cool. I like a race course that features match racing. The boundaries limit it. The boundaries make it hard to pass. Without the boundaries, maybe you have a little bit more opportunity to pass. And we've seen that over lots of years. I think the races could be longer. 25 minutes seems short. Most of us don't race 25-minute races. We race hour-long races. So maybe the America's Cup should be one race a day. They're certainly loaded with electronics and computers, but maybe take some of those off so the tacticians on the fly are making the call as opposed to what a programmed computer is. So I don't know if I'm old-fashioned or not, but I get the pendulum back a little bit closer to the sailor, away from technology a little bit, and a big monohull with national crews with plenty of lead changes would be all the excitement I would want.
So baseball, football, basketball, hockey even and soccer have seasons. And during the season, people get better and better and better, and the audience grows for the competition, and loyalties are established. Wouldn't the AC benefit by having a season, like a 5-month competition, ending in some kind of elimination, so that effectively you get really, really good at the new, even if it is a new design, and you learn lots and lots about it, as opposed to, and sponsors get more out of it, versus now where you have a short payback. How many races? What was the cost per race for the New York team?
Oh
Imagine.
my goodness, they spent 130 or more $1 million, and they got 8 races in the trials. So
cost per race, in other words.
And
if you're
6 races before that,
and you're a sponsor, yeah. And if you're a sponsor and you want to put money into the deal, you've got to look at your payback. So that question is, what about a long season leading up to the Cup competition as a format change?
Yeah, well, you want to keep as many teams in the game as late as you can, so those sponsors and those countries feel engaged. Now, it's almost 2 weeks before we get to the a week before we get to the America's Cup, and we're down to 2 teams. And look, that event in Australia spoke volumes to me. 13 challengers from 7 countries. There were 4 defense teams. We have not seen a multiple defender since 1995. So we've been running for 26 years in the America's Cup, and there's only 1 defense team. And so you need a 2-ring circus. The strength of the New York Yacht Club for so long is they always had multiple defense teams to race against, usually 3 or 4. The weakness of the Challenger was there always one of them. Now the Challengers have multiple boats and there's only 1 defender. So it's no accident that the Challenge has won 3 of the last 6 America's Cups, because there's more of them, more chances. Now we'll 3-3. We'll see what happens with this one, whether New Zealand can hold on. But I'll end with one thought here, Ron. If you look at the last several America's Cups, here's what's happened. A challenger wins. They go home and they defend, and then they lose. New Zealand wins in 1995. They defended in 2000. They lose in 03. Olingi wins in 03, defends in 07, and loses in 2010.
Right.
Oracle wins in 2010, defends in 2013, and loses. So if you go, I mean, it's kind of nifty going through this stuff.
Yeah.
But if you look at that trend, you could say, well, New Zealand challenged, and they're going to defend this time, and then they'll lose the next time. We'll see if that follows suit.
So you're going to bet. Now, are we going to bet a latte or a beer on who's going to win in 2 weeks? What are we betting first? What's the bet? Your fun story about Ted Turner and a bet with Blackcollar.
Well, Tom Blackcollar and Ted Turner are having dinner at the St. Francis Yacht Club for a 6-meter regatta. It was great fun. And Blackcollar comes over in his bravado way. So, Ted, are we going to have some bets on this races? And Turner says, well, how much you got? And after Tom recovers, he says, well, how about 1,000 a race? And O.L. Pitts, the Texan, is sitting there. Tom, if we did that, we could go hundreds of years. So anyway, Tom clobbered us in that series. And, I feel so lucky that I got to sail with all these characters and people larger than life that were so passionate about sailing.
So what are we going to bet? First of all, are we betting a beer, a latte, a drink at the yacht club? What are we betting? And then next thing,
we'll bet a beer at the St. Francis Yacht Club bar. I'll be mighty glad to get back out there sometime when we get COVID behind us. I miss being out there. But
so who's going to win?
Who's going to win? I'm going to go with New Zealand, and here's why.
That's tough because I also think New Zealand.
Well, we could be wrong based on what we just saw.
Yeah.
But they're in home waters.
Yeah.
Burling, at the age of, I think, 28 now, is at the top of his game. He sure made mincemeat out of Spithill on the starting line in Bermuda. He's won a gold medal in the Olympics in 2016, all those world championships. And Glenn Ashby is a genius at trimming. So I give New Zealand an edge. I'm sure they've been watching very closely, but we don't know. And that's why it's going to be so much fun to watch.
So since we both believe that New Zealand could win, and we both could be wrong, but we got to have a bet here. So what's the score going to be? How many races does the challenger win? How many races did it before the defender? 7-3.
It's not a sweep. 7-3.
7-3 Kiwis.
Yes.
Okay. I'll say 7-2 Kiwis.
Okay, very good.
We got to bet that way.
All
Gary,
right.
much fun, very thoughtful, educational as all of your talks, and entertaining for all of our audiences. Thank you very much for being our guest on the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. Look forward to sailing with you and seeing you out here on the West Coast as soon as you can get out.
Yep. Thank you very much.
This has been a presentation of the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.